Okay,
All right.
fantastic.
There we go. All right, folks. Instead of the countdown, you had us speaking. So here you go. We're going live. And then we just let everybody join us. Good morning. We're just going to give it a minute or two for anybody else to join us. All right, I'm going to go over some housekeeping. Sorry, I'm going to go over some housekeeping. My name is Kimberly Meck, and I am the Executive Director of Disability Empowerment Center. I am a white female with my hair pulled up on top of my head, and I have a blue and white patterned shirt on, and I'm sitting in my home office. Captions are available in Zoom. Click Show Subtitle in your Zoom menu bar to turn them on. Captions are also running at captionviewer.net. That URL is too long to read, so I'm going to ask our transcriptionist to please post that into chat. ASL interpreters are also available today. We are presenting in gallery view, so the interpreter should always be visible. You do not need to pin them. Please know that we have two interpreters, so if you pin the current interpreter, it could prevent you from seeing the active interpreter at an interpreter change. You do not need to be on Zoom to access this event. We will read all the questions out loud and voice any images on the screen so that the content will be available to all individuals calling in on the phone or who cannot see visual content. This event is being recorded, and we will answer questions periodically throughout the discussion. Please use the Q&A tab for any questions you have for the panelists, and please use the chat tab for general conversations and comments. Also, please note we will use both person with a disability and disabled person interchangeably, recognizing different people's preferences for person first or identity first language. And now I will hand it off to Lucy Burt.
Hey, good morning, everyone. My name's Lucy Burt. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the executive assistant at Disability Empowerment Center. I'm a white woman with dirty blonde hair pulled back and glasses. All right, so let me orient everyone to this event. This is the 8th session of the 2025 season for our Understanding Ableism monthly series. These events are hosted by the King County Disability Consortium, which is composed of over 40 disability serving organizations and individual disability advocates and activists. These Understanding Ableism events are led by the disability community, promoting disability justice within the King County enterprise. In this 8th episode of the Understanding Ableism series' 2025 season, we'll be looking at the impacts that Section 504, the ADA, and Olmstead has on people with disabilities' lives, both when they took effect as well as today. If any 3 landmark moves made by the United States government can be seen as huge wins for the disability community, they would be the signage of Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act in 1977, the signage of the Americans with Disabilities Act in 1990, and the decision of Olmstead versus LC in 1999. Section 504 is important because it prevents federally funded businesses like schools and hospitals from discriminating against people with disabilities. The ADA is important because it expands the protection of people with disabilities from ableism to non-federally funded businesses like restaurants and stadiums. Olmstead is important because after many years of people with disabilities being placed into institutions, the Supreme Court ruled that institutionalizing people with disabilities violates the ADA. Thanks to Olmstead, more people began to understand that people with disabilities can live independently, and centers for independent living all over the country, such as Disability Empowerment Center, exist to assist the disability community in reaching their independent living goals. Despite the positive impacts that Section 504, the ADA, and Olmstead had on the disability community, not very many Americans know about these landmark ways in which the disability community was recognized by the government as people. This results in instances like architectural designs violating ADA guidelines, the disability community continuing to not be helped in essential services like schools and hospitals, and authority figures still making decisions about people with disabilities' livelihoods without taking no for an answer. This is because for far too long, schools have not taught their students about the importance of Section 504, the ADA, and Olmstead. This webinar aims to change that because as the largest minority community in the US, the disability community deserves to be treated with respect. And Section 504, the ADA, and Olmstead are the exact federal laws and court rulings that are meant to make sure this happens. The document that is being pasted into the chat right now contains all the questions that will be asked on today's panel. So that'll be in the chat. All right. So now I'm going to ask each panelist to introduce themselves with their names, pronouns, a visual description, where they live, and what their connection is to the topic. So first off, I'm going to ask Cynthia.
Hi, my name is Cynthia Coffin, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. I go by, my visual description is I'm blonde hair. I have blonde hair. I've got an orange shirt and a gray jacket with a beach background on my Zoom, and then I'm connected to the top, and I actually live in North Seattle, Washington, the Greenwood area. I'm connected to the topic because I was in special education in high school and throughout my school years, elementary school, middle school, and I'm on the Medicaid program, and I also am on the HVCS waiver where I can get in-home support.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Cynthia. Next, we've got Luna. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Luna Fera. I use she, her pronouns. Visual description about myself. I have long, dark brown hair. I have light skin, and I am wearing a black shirt. I live in Eugene, Oregon. And my connection to the topic, I have been a manual wheelchair user for 13 years now, since I was 8 years old. And I am also on Medicaid, and I have been a long-time advocate for the disabled community. So happy to be here today.
Thanks so much, Luna. And Carol, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Good morning. My name is Carol Rozumalski. My pronouns are she, her, hers. My visual description is I have short salt and pepper hair with glasses that are chunky, and I'm wearing a white sweater and also headphones so I can see and hear everyone better. My connection to the topic is that I am 53 years old. and I have a lot of lived experience with 504, but no ADA. I am a person who works full time in government, and I am living independently. I hear that the other panelists are on Medicaid. I am not. I use private insurance for my health care. Thank you.
All right. Sorry, one moment. All right. We're going to go ahead and get started with our questions. So first off, we're going to go in the same order that everyone introduced themselves. So Cynthia, so what regular aspects of your life do you believe would be harder or impossible if the ADA Section 504 or Olmstead never existed?
Well, for one, it's kind of getting emotional. I'm gonna be honest, I think I'd still be living with my parents. I won't be able to go to college, let alone getting a master's degree in social work back in 2023. I think my life would have been different. I don't think I would have been able to ever move out on my own because one of the programs that I got involved with back in the early 2000s, because I was segue into it through IEP, was Department of Vocational Rehab. They're the ones that helped pay for my school. They helped pay for technology to be able to get through school. They practically paid for 10 years for me to go through college, graduate my bachelor's degree. Then I went back in 2021 to get my master's degree. So that is, now I have a job, full-time job as a program coordinator at Disability Empowerment Center. And if Section 504 never existed, I don't think that would have happened. It would have taken me longer to get to this point. And I also think that being on Medicaid, I would not be able to get the in-home home care support that I get now. Being able to have somebody to come in to help me clean and cook and to assist with daily activities, that would not exist. And I believe that if this program is taken away or reduced, it will affect my life too as well, not let alone other people's lives that depend on these programs.
Luna, same question. What regular aspects of your life do you believe would be harder or impossible if these did not exist?
Yeah, so as a wheelchair user, I wouldn't be able to access the world at large without the protections and supports of the ADA Section 504 or Olmstead. So for instance, K through 12 public school education would have been impossible for me to access at all, much less comfortably considering the accommodations I requested. Especially in the beginning of my disability journey when I needed more academic support during my recovery period from my TBI or traumatic brain injury. If the 504 or IEP, which is individualized education plan for those who don't know, if that was not available, I would have been isolated from school. It was integral to my recovery and mental well-being that the trauma of my disability didn't also include the trauma of isolation from the academic setting and my peers. This also, the stigmatization of disabled folks, yes, still exists, which is why we have this panel to advocate on matters that impact the disabled community. However, it would have been so much worse if Olmstead had not created a protection against powerful financially driven institutions. The institutions that could have had the power to block disabled people from accessing the same community resources as able-bodied peers. And it places a bit of a check on them now due to Olmstead. This allows disabled folks to be a bigger part of the broader community and decreases the stigmatization of disabled people due to our ability to exist and thrive in these predominantly able-bodied spaces. I am also a rising senior at my university and getting prepared to enter the workforce, which has historically rejected disabled folks purely based on the presumption of incompetence. This widespread assumption that disabled workers are less capable than able-bodied workers results in disabled folks often having to resort to hiding their disability during the application and interview process, even requesting phone or Zoom interviews instead of in person to avoid discrimination surrounding visible disabilities. While the discrimination, though subtle, more subtle, still exists, there is an ample amount of protections for disabled people applying to jobs. Additionally, receiving accommodation is a legal right after after receiving a job offer to make the workplace accessible, but also to preserve disabled people's dignity, like, for instance, access to the bathroom, and to ensure a level playing field. So yeah, if these didn't exist, life would have been impossible.
Thank you so much. Carol, let's hear your thoughts on this question.
My experience resembles a lot of what Luna and Cynthia have described in terms of 504 and ADA making K through 12 education accessible as well as college accessible. Cynthia, I also have an MSW, so congratulations on that. Glad to have you a part of the MSW community. So, where I think I can add value to this panel is to talk about my employment experience. And that's where I think ADA and 504 and to some degree Olmstead have really opened up possibilities for folks. I consider myself very lucky in that after I graduated with my MSW in 1995, that I have been basically continuously employed since then. And I recognize that as being a very rare opportunity for a person with a disability. I think where I have recognized that there are pathways that the law allows us to thrive, or in theory, in the workplace, that individually that may not always be the case, that that people may be experiencing discrimination based on visible disabilities. I use a power wheelchair. There's no way to hide it. I take it with me everywhere. So there's no way to talk around it. But like I said, I feel like I've been extremely lucky in that through relationships with people that they have lifted me up and helped me access things that I would never otherwise have been able to access. So while the law is there, and the law kind of establishes, I think, a foundation for people to establish relationships that are strong and enduring and community based. And so I think that the role of the law in creating that community fabric is where I think there has been a lot of value added.
Thank you so much, everyone. Now on to the next question. So Cynthia, how have you used the ADA Section 504 or Olmstead to advocate for accessibility?
When I was in college, I used it to advocate for myself for longer time on test and longer time on my assignments. I used it for even through Department of Vocational Rehab tutoring. I used it for that. And then the Olmstead, I advocated for getting increased services for home care just recently. They just upped my hours from 47 hours a month to 77 hours a month. So I used it there, and I even use it just going to the doctor's office, advocating for myself for better care. And when I was in high school in special ed, I used it for longer time on test and used it for Section 504 to get larger print on my assignments. But one of the things they didn't teach me was Braille back in high school, which was really interesting. But I did use it, Fusion software helped it, being able to get software on the computer. I used it for that. So there's a lot of places in my life I had used 504 to increase accessibility.
And Luna, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so similarly, I have used Section 504 or the ADA or Olmstead to do a lot of self-advocacy, whether it comes to academic accommodations, also for increased time during tests, the ability to type rather than handwrite things because of my carpal tunnel, the ability to have accessible housing, that I can access the bathroom and everything. But so the ADA indicates that public places need to be accessible for people with disabilities, but there's often little recourse that is available to accessibility advocates. One option we have is that if an institution receives federal funding, those funds can be withdrawn if the institution does not meet the ADA standards of accessibility. While this is a crucial component of creating widespread accessibility, oftentimes the funding in question is not significant enough to a large institution to create much of an incentive to instill accessibility. For instance, like my university receives a lot of funds from places like Nike, and or just their huge sports programs. So when the federal funding was being withdrawn because they weren't meeting ADA standards until more recently, they could get away with it because they had the money. um, so additionally, institutions that are free of federal jurisdictions, like private businesses and residential buildings that were built prior to the Fair Housing Act, they don't have to adhere to things like the ADA, leaving room for more subtle or sometimes even blatant discrimination of the disabled population. with that said, I have used the language of ADA Section 504 and Olmstead to pursue advocacy projects that call out institutions and organizations for disregarding this federal law. I do this in hopes of continuing the work of disability advocates before me, like Judy Human, who spearheaded things like the ADA and Section 504 in protecting disabled folks like me and in my community.
And Carol, so how have you used the ADA Section 504 or Olmstead to advocate for accessibility?
Well, 504, I think, set a precedent for advocacy. And when I was in college as a freshman at the University of Washington, there was actually an organized protest to create a wheelchair access ramp between Red Square and South Campus. For those who are familiar with the campus, there's a very grand stairway that leads from Red Square to South Campus, which is a very direct connector from the north and south part of the campus. For those with mobility access issues, we needed to go around in a path that was very far and energy consuming. So we felt that it was fair to create a ramp at that location. The disability community at that time uh, created a protest where we blocked access at the top of the stairway and we asked students to go around at a very busy time of day. And that was to increase awareness of what we had to experience to get to where we needed to go. This protest actually took place the day after ADA was passed by Congress. So it was in that period between congressional passage and the president actually signing it into law. So with 504, I think it very much foreshadowed the ADA. And then to pivot into ADA access and how that has been a point of advocacy, it creates a conversation point for workplace access, which I find due to my mobility needs are environmental. So is the bathroom accessible? Is my workspace accessible? Can I get to the different places in the office that I need to access for that? With ADA, there's a conversational starting point, which I'm grateful for, but I would say it is actually quite awkward to begin one's employment experience having to talk about using the bathroom or other things that are quite personal. And I'll just add as a final thought, with more and more people working remotely, this is something that people with disabilities have spearheaded as an accommodation. And I naively thought that through COVID, that there would be a greater appetite to provide remote work as an accommodation. But I find that there is more resistance around that idea than I anticipated. So there's more work to be done. And I hope those stories provide value to this seminar.
Thank you so much, everyone. All right, we'll move on to the next question, question 3. So Section 504 is currently in danger of being suppressed. If this happens, how could your right to be yourself be impacted? And Cynthia.
Well, basically, it'll be impacted by some, if Section 504 does get suppressed or if it goes away, it could definitely impact my ability to be able to use DVR services to get accommodation, newer equipment or anything, or it could impact, one of the things it could impact if Medicaid gets reduced, which I'm already seeing and happening in other states like Colorado and different states across the US, my hours can get reduced from 77 to 20 hours a month. I'm just using that as an example. And that can impact my home care, being able to get a caregiver into the home to help me on a weekly basis. And it can definitely make a huge impact to quality of life. If Section 504 gets revoked or gets reduced, it could impact different, it could impact my even ability to work, because it being able to get updated technology can be difficult too, being able to get that paid for through DVR, or being able to get one of my goals is to get licensed as a social worker, and that could impact me being able to get that funded. And so there's huge impacts on losing 504. It can, if I was in high school, it would have impacted me, being able to get accommodations of getting through school. And if I wanted to go back to college and get my PhD, it can impact me being able to get the accommodations to have longer time on test and longer time on and be able to get extended time on my assignments, which would make it really difficult to get through a PhD program. So there's a huge significant impact if that does get reduced.
Luna, love to hear your thoughts on this question.
Yeah, so similarly to what Cynthia has said, quality of life would just go down the drain, and my access to accommodations, whether that we are speaking about my academic accommodations that I receive in college, and thereby my ability to get my undergraduate bachelor's degree and my master's degree, as I hope to get, would be significantly impacted by my lack of ability to receive those accommodations. And also my living comfortably in my housing, that would be affected. And I would be in constant fear that I wouldn't have a safe place to live. And so more than that, my ability to confidently and independently take up space within the outside community would be completely repealed. Instead, I would be in a constant state of fight or flight, wondering if I would need to argue with someone in order to access basic human rights, like access to a bathroom or just different floor levels of a building. Or if I would just be automatically rejected and barred from an institution. I would be subsequently scared to speak out against discriminatory practices for fear of the few remaining dignities and rights I have being revoked. For instance, Social Security income or SSI. I would be extremely fearful that I couldn't have reliable, accessible transportation outside my home, even to go to the grocery store and back. On the other hand, I would not have reliable access to my apartment unit should the elevator break down. In other words, I would be trapped either inside or outside my home. I would lose the ability to connect with my friends and families overseas, as accessible travel regulations would also likely be rescinded. That does not even go to mention my potential isolation within my current cultural perspective. In other words, my ability to enjoy learning about new cultures and worldviews, or just enjoy a vacation, would be revoked. My ability to access public schools and universities would also be called to question, since they weren't those institutions would no longer be forced to adhere to certain accessibility standards. As we've been saying, academic accommodations, that goes out the window. My right to exist comfortably and comfortably access a space would then hinge on the kindness of someone's heart. My freedom would no longer be a requirement of a corporation, but rather it would be a courtesy, a luxury. Um, Additionally, any accommodations I do receive would likely be coming out of my own pocket, which I just point blank cannot afford now, and certainly wouldn't be able to if the ADA was revoked and I couldn't get a job. So it would be bad.
And Carol, Section 504 is currently in danger of being suppressed. If this happens, how could your right to be yourself be impacted?
Well, before I actually answer this question, I just want to call out the fact that the efforts to suppress 504 are based on lies that accommodations are cumbersome or too expensive to implement. So there's a lot of data out there to show that the cost to benefit ratio is small. And I think Luna, referenced the fact that there are the ability to choose righteously over other choices when a university may have a very healthy athletic program that has millions of dollars, and when a student with a disability asks for an accommodation that is cost minimal, those are ethical choices. And so I guess I'm answering the question in a roundabout way, which is to say that the suppression of 504 would mean fighting against this misinformation that is still widespread despite the ADA being in existence for 35 years now. So, and in terms of how I would be impacted uh, individually, I think most systems that we rely on every day would be limited to me or not accessible at all, starting with transportation. I use public transportation for all of my needs, which involves riding buses and light rail in Seattle. That would likely erode or not be supported at all. Um, Healthcare would be dramatically um, limited, even though I am a person with private insurance. Um, as we referenced earlier, there was nothing to stop private insurance companies from acting in a discriminatory way, and they would say, "Oh, we're trying to reduce costs to our stockholders, and we are going to make decisions that pre-existing conditions would not be covered." And that was actually a practice that existed prior to 504 and the ADA. And then housing has been referenced. I am lucky enough to own my own condominium, so I have been able to create an environment that is accessible to me. But I would see that I would be more homebound. I would be less likely to advance in my career. I could also, maybe even be laid off or fired from my position due to perceptions that I could not fulfill the obligations of my job. So, that's my answer to the question. In some ways, it's very unimaginable because I've lived a lifetime with these laws in place, and to see them go away or be not regulated is frightening.
Question 4 to Cynthia. How do you think school curriculum could benefit from teaching the ADA Section 504 or Olmstead?
I think they could teach it in the public school system, especially at the high school level. They can have a class on it, your freshman or sophomore year, or embed it into the history class. I think it's really important that schools teach the 504 and ADA to educate non-disabled peers to accept people with disabilities and to understand how the ADA and 504 impact people with disabilities, and because eventually those kids are going to grow up and they're going to become leaders. They're going to be making decisions. So I think if they start a curriculum embedded in with the history curriculum, I think that would be a great opportunity for at least at the high school level for students. As it would definitely, students can learn a lot from learning about the 504 and ADA, and a lot of students will be able to utilize that information to even go home and talk to their parents about the ADA and 504. So it's a really, really good idea if they can implement that across the country.
Luna, so how do you think school curriculums could benefit from teaching the ADA Section 504 or Olmstead?
Yeah, so here's the thing. If schools don't take the time to educate their youth on these legal protections, like the ADA, Section 504, and Olmstead, larger entities like the federal government have more leverage to quietly rescind these protections without much repercussion. That, and without education, the government can fatally misrepresent the ADA, Section 504, and Olmstead, twisting the narrative against disabled people and what access actually means. Instead, they are serving themselves for their own short term gain. By adding this education in school curriculums, more youth may also be able to see the disabled community as such a marginalized community that has a history, culture, and elders who have fought tooth and nail against societal oppression. This would go beyond the status quo that boxes the disabled individual as a caricature or a novelty to be pitied. Instead, it would be um, portraying these people as members of a marginalized community, much like how the LGBTQ plus community is beginning to be perceived in our society. The disabled community is so much more than just the title, the word disabled. We encompass the history of the disability rights movement, represent a broad spectrum of disabilities and lived experience, and have an extremely diverse range of community members, speaking on different ages, occupations, income levels, races, ethnicities, sexualities, genders, political affiliations, religious backgrounds, and so much more. Pretty much anyone you can think of can be disabled and likely will in their lifetime. So it becomes paramount, this importance of educating on the disabled population and also the rights that we have fought so hard to maintain and increase, quite frankly.
And Carol, what are your thoughts on this question?
This is a very interesting question because the way it is phrased is, how do you think school curriculums could benefit by teaching ADA 504 and Olmstead? I would say the current state is that educators don't feel like they would benefit by teaching this content because it creates a knowledgeable student population that can call out areas where things are not being followed according to the law. So, and we also see examples right now in America where the history of marginalized people is being erased. Um, so when we phrase this question, I would say, there is a more long-term societal benefit to teaching people about ADA 504 and Olmstead, so that there is a reclamation of power, that people can say, I know that this is wrong and you need to do it in a different way. And that will then, create a stronger infrastructure for people to live in. To Luna's point, 20% of the population at any given time is going to have a disability, and it is a community that you can be a part of unexpectedly. So there are those of us that may have lifetime experiences with disability, and there may be people that later in their lives encounter it. So, I think I have given a mixed answer to this question, but I think the benefit is for the long-term health and longevity of society to understand what their rights are and to know that having a disability later on in life is not catastrophic, that you can actually thrive and do well, even with a disability.
Thank you so much, everyone. Well, we've got a little bit of extra time before we need to move on to audience questions. So I'd love to ask the extra questions that we've got, the backup questions. And Cynthia, we'll start with you once again, if that is all right. So recently, the Department of Energy announced their intent to remove some aspects of Section 504 because they think it will save them money. What is your reaction to this news?
I think it's just a way to save money. It's not reason to eliminate 504. It's definitely Department of Energy trying to do that. That's gonna make it harder for Section 504 to be implemented for accommodations for people who work there. So it's definitely it's rough to hear that they want to do that. So my reaction is, I think I want to advocate to and start start working on maybe I want to write letters to my Congress and let them know that this can impact people who want to work at the Department of Energy, because if someone with disability wants to work there and they want to get a job and they won't be able to get the accommodations they need. So it's definitely rough to hear that they want to reduce 504.
Yes, I would agree with that. Luna, what are your thoughts on this question? I'll read it again because it's not up on the screen. Recently, the Department of Energy announced their intent to remove some aspects of Section 504 because they think it will save them money. What is your reaction to this news?
I am very affronted by this because it reduces someone's quality of life to just a paycheck. These finances are constantly used as an argument of that translates to, you are too expensive to live, so sucks. And that is, first off, blatantly untrue of the accommodations that they are claiming to be so financially exorbitant that or not feasible is just blatantly untrue, because these organizations have the funds to provide basic rights to their constituents, and so that the whole community can cohesively work together and just live, thrive. And also it is going against the fact that certain accommodations also are of benefit to able-bodied folks. And so it not only increases the quality of life for disabled population, but also for able-bodied populations. We're talking about like curb cuts, elevators. They are those type of accommodations built for that, yes, benefit disabled folks, also benefit able-bodied folks. Everybody uses the elevator, and people on bikes and with carts and everything, they utilize the curb cuts to cross the street. So it is a huge setback should the Department of Energy or any other departments take up this argument that it's just too expensive to provide accommodations.
And Carol, love to hear your thoughts on this question.
My first thought on this question is, again, here is the lie that accommodations are too expensive being used to influence decision making. I also want to say that government is very powerful in its decision making, and to the point that the other panelists have raised, there's enough money to do the accommodations. It's a matter of making choices that are aligned with what the American people want. And I don't believe that this is the sort of decision that the American population as a whole wants to see a department of the federal government making. And to conclude my thoughts on this question, if they proceed to remove 504 from their foundation, they're going to find themselves with a lot of experienced workers having to leave the workforce. And do they have a succession plan to replace that experience? And my guess is that they don't. So that is going to create a huge gap in experience, knowledge, and that actually fulfilling that gap and replacing those workers would be much more expensive and costly to the department than it would just to keep 504 in place.
All right, and it looks like we've got time for the last extra question. So first off, Cynthia. So with one big beautiful bill in heavy quotation marks about to take effect, the devastating cuts to Medicaid could mean that more people with disabilities could be institutionalized. So with Olmstead being a still in effect case that allows people with disabilities to live independently, do you think Olmstead will be used to challenge any decisions to put people with disabilities in institutions because one big beautiful bill bankrupted the services they would have visited elsewhere? So why or why not?
I think there'll be a lot of challenges with this bill, because what it's doing, and it's already cutting funding for services. I'm already hearing that some people are getting reduced hours for home care. So I think there'll be a lot of challenges to the bill, because it's impacting the whole United States and every state across the US. And the reason why, because the reduction in Medicaid, it's going to affect hospitals, it's going to affect rural hospitals, it's going to affect people who are on the home community-based services, on the different type of waivers. And so basically if I think there will be a lot of challenges in the court system over the next 4 years to help combat the bill and to try to change policy on this bill. Because what's going to do is, even for my own life, it's going to impact a lot of people being able to receive proper health care. And even so yeah, I can just see a lot of challenges coming in the next couple of years.
And Luna, same question.
Yeah, well, if Medicaid gets cut, I know for just myself personally, I will, all of my medical supplies for my personal hygiene, and to keep me healthy and happy will be rescinded. And I don't have much of a backup plan besides to just start shouting from the rooftops that and advocating against such a blatant discriminatory and oppressive bill as the big beautiful bill in quotation marks. So yeah, I do think that there would be a lot of legal repercussions that are taken up by legal advocates, um, like in defending Olmstead or the ADA or Section 504, as has been happening currently. I don't fully know how effective those strategies are going to be should the able-bodied population and just other disabled folks not band together and advocate against this oppressive move. I say this because there have been those efforts done by legal advocates, whether it is towards these to protect these laws like the ADA in Section 504 Olmstead, or if it's for other protections as well. And yet, this administration has steamrolled ahead with these attacks against against these protections. And so legal advocacy is becoming less and less effective because they just throw it out the window and say, well, we're just gonna steamroll ahead. So I think it is paramount for the able-bodied and disabled community to band together and start speaking up and against these oppressive actions.
And Carol, go ahead and finish us out with this question.
I do think that there will be efforts to challenge the Medicaid cuts that are in the big beautiful bill. I am somewhat pessimistic about what the outcome of those challenges would be, given the composition of the Supreme Court right now. We have seen other laws repealed at the Supreme Court level, such as Roe v. Wade, and others are being discontinued as well. So I'm fearful that if something were to go all the way up to the Supreme Court, that it would end up affirming the things that are in the so-called big beautiful bill. I'm going to take a little bit of a detour into saying that it's not just Medicaid cuts that impact people with disabilities. I mean, obviously they do, but I also want to call out the fact that many caregivers are immigrants or refugees to this country, and the things that are being done to target immigrants and refugees are also adversely impacting people with disabilities. And I would be remiss not to take this opportunity to name that. So even as we talk about preserving Medicaid, we also need to build coalitions that protect people that come to this country and who provide the care that we need. I was recently in a short hospital stay, and a number of the nursing staff were from other countries originally, and we would be doing deep harm to our infrastructure if we don't try to block those efforts that are targeted towards immigrants and refugees.
Thank you so much for answering all of Colin's and my questions, everyone. Thank you so much. Looks like we have plenty of time for audience questions. If there's anyone out there watching who has a question for one of our panelists, now is the time. Be taking a look at the chat here. Go ahead and drop those in the chat. Give it just a few minutes. see, it looks like there aren't any audience questions, but I do have a special specific question for
Lucy, this is
Cynthia.
Kimberly. Sorry, one
Yes.
just came up.
Ah, perfect. All right. So this is from Philip. So given the possible perfect storm of Medicaid cuts and deferred maintenance of universally designed residences, is there a movement that you're aware of to organize disabled folks into co-housing? And anyone can answer who wishes. I think we can break the order a little bit here. Cynthia, Luna, or Carol, does anyone have an answer for that question from Philip from the audience?
I don't know of a movement right now, but I did some research when I was in my grad program, and there's a program in Colorado that did some co-housing. And I'm definitely for co-housing because I think we're headed that way with the rising rents and being able to afford to pay rent. But yeah, I definitely can do some more research and get that out to you guys if you need me to. I wouldn't mind joining efforts on that because I think co-housing would be a way to for people to be able to even to afford rents like roommate matching or buying a home and doing a 3-bedroom home and be able to split the rent like a program where you can do roommate matching. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, this is Luna speaking. Similar to Cynthia, I'm not aware of formal movements for co-housing, but it is certainly a strategy that I have been talking with my disabled peers about to be like, hey, should things go south, let's maybe think about like getting a big house to live all together, because it's also a strategy for pooling money to pay for rent, and then also considering that we would all be a disabled unit in this household, providing accommodations suddenly becomes easier because we all are in the same or similar boat that we need those housing accommodations. So, and we get it. So there won't be any like pushback that you might receive from rooming with somebody who is able-bodied. So I also will be happy to do some more research on co-housing. Thank you so much for asking that question.
I can pop in and offer some thoughts about this. I know in the city of Seattle, there is a social housing movement where it is an effort to bring together to address housing affordability. And if I were in the position to be seeking housing at this time, I think I would want to infiltrate that movement and to see about how social housing could become more accessible as a way of counteracting some of the anti-accessibility efforts that are going on right now.
All right, thank you so much, everyone, and thank you, Philip, for that question. I just received another audience question from Hawk Brandon. So I am trying to get a conference I go to comply with ADA, and they're blaming it on the building and, well, we cannot guarantee the elevator will work. I use a mobility scooter and have requested a specific elevator for folks using mobility devices. As the elevators are rather small, ADA compliant, but still small. Do any of the panelists have any advice about this this issue?
This is Luna speaking again. My first thought with this is to reference the fact that you may not be the only person with a mobility aid that comes to this conference, or the fact that, you know, as we kind of referenced earlier in the panel, anybody can have a temporary disability at any time. Somebody breaks their leg and needs to use a wheelchair, or at the very least crutches. They're going to need a working elevator to access this panel too. My other thought is to push the fact that if they truly want to be welcoming in this panel, or I'm sorry, in this conference, and to have all of these different perspectives and things brought to this conference. Accessibility is part of that equation to achieve that mission. So fundamentally, you have to have access to the conference. And if they are still pushing against that, then to be like, okay, what other options do you have for me? Do you have another location that is going to be on the first floor or with a larger elevator? Because at this point, it should not be on you to solve their accessibility or lack thereof issues for them. It should be their problem, and so to push that that fact onto them, and unfortunately, they'll probably try to make it your problem and be like, oh yeah, well, we can't do it. So if you have any ideas, let us know. Again, it's the pushing for either different location of the conference itself, or saying that, okay, this is the strategy that I use to get up the stairs. Like, for instance, for myself as a manual wheelchair user, I can do a floor transfer and pop up the stairs, but I will need somebody to help me bring up my wheelchair and then also help me with my legs as I am popping up the stairs. And then, of course, more time to arrive earlier and later and all that. And then I'm going to need you to help me out and comply with that. What are your thoughts? So something like that strategy as well, to just prevent them or present them with solution, where they can't just throw their hands up and be like, this is an insurmountable problem, are my first thoughts with that. Hopefully that makes sense.
I would say to add to this is that it's, there are always going to be factors that are inaccessible, and something that the conference can do is just to have like a communication plan around if somebody encounters uh, a barrier to accessibility, is there a point of contact that they can reach out to help mitigate that problem. So for this year's conference, it may be difficult to attain, a better location because conference planning happens far in advance. But I would encourage you to consider is getting involved in planning the conference if you're a regular attendee, because it seems that you have a perspective that would be very valuable in the planning of the conference. And I would reframe accommodations as an amenity, like, hey, we have this great location that is it's already accessible, so we're ready to accommodate people with mobility limitations. For me, that would be something that I look for when I choose where to spend my conference dollars, so to speak. So those are some thoughts that I have on how to address it. Um, I think Luna makes a fair point about offering solutions, but I would counter that by saying the conference organizers also need to have a way of receiving requests for accommodation in real time.
Thank you so much. It's a great question. We've got time for one more audience question if anyone has any last minute questions. And in the meantime, I think I've got a quick final question for Cynthia, and I know Philip is in the audience, so if he wants to sound off in the chat with an answer to this question as well, please do. So Cynthia, on the week of July 21st, you folks went to Washington, D.C. for a National Center for Independent Living conference, as well as to talk to members of Congress. What were some of the different ideas about accessibility in the United States that you heard from the Congress people that you talked to?
Some ideas that they had was we had an artificial intelligence seminar. They brought up a lot of how AI is going to make accessibility, increase accessibility. Some of the other ideas is we being able to increase better, make it more accessible for people to get jobs. There was a lady that had a job platform, was she a guest speaker. She had a platform to for people to apply for jobs. And then we just had different ideas on how to just basically to keep advocating to your legislator and senator on a lot of the issues that we're dealing with across the nation, and to keep calling and talking to them. Those are the ideas that were embedded in the conference.
And Philip has a fantastic answer here in the chat. We'll finish out with, Philip says, a quiet, even defiant sense that members of Congress who advocate alongside of us are willing to wait out the current chill, to stay in touch, and to continue calling and emailing. It's a bit of advice there at the end. you calling and emailing. All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming to be an audience member for this webinar. And thank you so much to our panelists. So before we adjourn, I would like everyone who attended today to please take a moment to provide us some feedback. You can either access a quick survey via the QR code in the PowerPoint. See, let's get you that QR code, or via the link in the chat. It should take you less than 5 minutes. Thank you so much for doing that. And Kimberly, I'll pass it on to you to close us out.
Thank you. And I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today. Special thank you to our panelists. I really appreciate you sharing your thoughts and information. It was awesome. As a reminder, this event was recorded and you can view the video later at Disability Empowerment Center's YouTube channel. Our October webinar will be about the ableist flaws in public transportation. It'll take place on October 21st. Thanks again and have a great rest of your day.